Team, welcome back. Today I sit down with Brooke Turner. She is an award-winning educator, presenter, and coach, and she specializes in the field of women's health. In this episode, we're talking about pre and postpartum, linking it back to the world of women's sports performance. So much gold, so much wisdom in this podcast. If you're a female or you're like me, you're a coach who works with females, or you have a female partner, you need to know about this stuff. Enjoy this podcast. Brooke Turner, welcome to the Process Podcast.
Ed, thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing really great. Really excited to be here.
Why are you doing really great?
Because I'm here to talk to you, my amazing new friend who I recently met, about all things training and performance for pregnancy and motherhood, something that I'm very passionate about.
Love it. I mean, we did just meet. We met in Bali not too long ago. I think the world of social media made me feel like I actually met you way before actually meeting you. But we were both working at a techno gym event where we were kind of had our own sectioned off area, working with a group of very keen learners on topics that we both felt very passionate about. So, mine was all about programming, and I felt like every person that came out of your workshop was like, oh my God, just had my mind blown from what I just learned from Brooke. So what were you talking about that weekend?
Yeah, so the topic was being strong through the seasons, and whether you're navigating pregnancy, motherhood, or the pauses, peri, post menopause, making sure that it was specifically for coaches this event. So making sure that the coaches could ensure that their female members were feeling empowered to move at whatever season of life they were navigating. Because often when we think that athleticism and performance has to stop once we become pregnant or once we enter the hood, which I call motherhood. But it's not, it's this lifelong continuum. So making sure that women can continue to move in the way that they enjoy, but that's also effective for whatever season they're navigating.
Brooke, what's your story? Like what brought you to, becoming someone who felt so passionately about, women's health? Um,
Mhm.
I'm curious to hear your story.
Yes. So for me, it's always been sport and fitness. I knew from a really young age that I was going to land. I wanted to be an elite athlete. I wanted to go to the Olympics and run a 400 metres like Kathy Freeman, who was the first Indigenous Australian to win a gold medal. That was going to be me. So athletics, netball, basketball, it was always athleticism was a really big part of my upbringing. And I credit that to my parents who sort of led the way in that. And so after high school, I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I knew I wanted to be in the sport and fitness space. I didn't become an elite athlete. That sort of fell away. But hey, there's still forever. I can achieve that later on. Um, and so essentially, I went to university, did exercise and sports science, and a postgrad in nutrition, and had a few jobs in the fitness, the health, the mining industry that all related back to that. But I always wanted to have my own thing. But I was working for a company, a mining company. I was on a good pay. I had really good benefits. And you can sort of get the blinkers on. It can feel really scary to take that leap from a secure job to then going out and being a business owner yourself, which, I know that you probably know and feel that as well, taking that risk. And I'd calculated the numbers. But essentially, I was met with a redundancy or a redeployment opportunity when I was on maternity leave with my first child. So that really gave me the push to use that as an opportunity to um, bridge out on my own and do my own thing. But I suppose before that, I really landed in the space of women's fitness. When we thought about wanting to become parents over 10 years ago, I was really excited by that thought, but I was also a bit torn because I didn't have the experience, despite having the knowledge, I didn't have the experience of going through pregnancy, and I wanted to still go to my CrossFit classes. I still wanted to train with intensity and intent, but every coach needs a coach, every doctor needs a doctor. So I set out to find the information, and everywhere I looked was either outdated, it was unreputable, or it was sit on a fit ball and do 2 kilo bicep curls. And that's not how I like to move my body. And so it was from that point that I made it my mission to create resources, not only for women, but for exercise professionals who work with women to make sure they can feel educated and empowered through that journey. So that's where my ebooks were born, which now forms my web-based app, Balance by Brooke, and also my certified course, Functional Fitness for Pregnancy and Postpartum, which I've been delivering now for 5 years, online, virtually, and all around the world with hundreds of certified trainers now with that qualification.
Love it. Brooke, how many children do you have now?
I have 3 now.
Okay. I want to go back to child number one.
Yes.
So, okay. So what it sounds like was, when you guys had decided, okay, we want a family, that kind of was like your kickstart to actually start educating yourself and figuring out, okay, how am I going to successfully navigate this journey?
Yeah.
How much learning, how much of that navigating did you do before actually having your first child?
All of it. Sort of I did all of it before him, and then having that pregnancy experience was then, um, putting that theory into practice, essentially, getting to because some of the things that I'd learnt and I'd studied, like I said, this was over 10 years ago, so the world of pregnancy exercise is still evolving, so it was still very, conservative. There wasn't anything sort of more progressive and exciting in that space. And that's when I really identified that gap in the market is that there's nothing wrong with Pilates and going for walks and doing yoga. But if we want people to be successful and have compliance to a program, they need to enjoy the way they move. Um, so I did what I could in terms of the study. I linked in with other professionals as well, and had them review material that I'd sort of created. And then so applying it to my own journey, but then also with the women that I was working with in my small group training, as well, really helped evolve what I'd learned and what I believed. And I think just that continuing education, because what was the studies that were available 10 years ago are so different to the information that is now available, which is great, but it can also we take what we want from these research articles and things as well.
Okay, in that research process, so you're learning all about how you're going to successfully navigate your first child. What was some of like the biggest, I guess not debunks of myths, but like what were some of the biggest like maybe some misconception and preconceived ideas that you had of what this
Yeah.
was going to be like versus what you actually started learning and implementing? What were some of those like
Mhm.
big contrasts?
A really big one was the ego.
Mm,
And I've worked with, yeah, hundreds of women through single, twin, even quad pregnancies, and I've been coaches and general population women. But it's the mindset shift that comes with it. And so for me, I was so excited when we did fall pregnant, and I was like, great, like I'm so excited to prove that, pregnancy is not an illness and it doesn't have to hold you back and you can still go to the gym, which is all absolutely true and accurate. But on the flip side, I also had to be really mindful of all of these physiological changes that I was aware was occurring through my body. So my cardiac output, my resting heart rate, my respiratory uptake had all increased, the changes to the load on my abdominal wall and my pelvic floor. And I was really lucky through all 3 of my pregnancies. I felt really good. And in a sense, if you're not educated in that area and you feel good, we're told to listen to our body, which I feel is one of these myths that we sort of need to debunk is yes, you do want to listen to your body, but you also want to make sure that you are informed and educated as to the changes that are happening so that you can make better exercise choices. Um, because just because you can do something while you're pregnant or just because you feel good, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should continue doing that, especially if that's how you want to keep moving in 10, 20, 30 years' time.
okay, so when you said the ego, so you're
Mm.
basically, you were like, and I can 100% resonate with this, by the way, because as someone who's about to become a dad, I'm having all these people being like, "Oh, Ed, can't wait to see, your life crumble and all these routines that you post about, you're gonna fail with all of them." And a part of me is inside like, actually can't wait to just prove all of you wrong. I'm gonna be successful through this. So what were the changes in ego that you had to face and deal with? So like, this idea that I'm gonna be warrior woman and show everyone that, you can do this
Mhm.
to actually, what you had to change in terms of that mindset.
Yeah. And I think the big one is like on the gym floor, if you identify as someone who's generally lifting the most or finishing first or running the fastest
Was that
or
you?
yeah, that was me, being I wanted to be that person. It's okay. This is just it's telling yourself to suck eggs essentially. Be like, this isn't forever, this is just for now. It's if I and I always tell women, walk away from a workout thinking that you could have done more instead of thinking, oh crap, I think I've overdone it. Because if you do feel good, that's great. But we do need to scale it back. So for me, it was more, okay, just because you could lift that before you fell pregnant, you're now pregnant, like back it off a little bit or slow it down. Or it doesn't matter if you don't do the full reps, or if there was, say, like a butterfly sit up or a toaster bar or something programmed, I needed to be doing what I call either my less sexy but essential core exercises to focus on things like my transverse abdominis and deeper core muscles instead of trying to be like, hey, I can still do this movement. So I think it's just understanding that your body's changing, and just because you aren't doing something right now doesn't mean you can't get back to doing it.
Love it. Okay, what about child one versus child two and three? So, I think
Mm.
what I'm understanding here is that you're already very knowledgeable before you had your first child. You're able to practice and implement all the stuff you were learning. But I'm sure the learning process has continued to evolve over the years. So, what then changed, if anything, with your second and third children versus your first?
Yeah. So there was mental changes and physical changes, or physiological and physical. Um, Mental changes after my first, I was like, if I can carry a pregnancy and have a baby. So all three of my children were vaginal deliveries and unmedicated. So I did a lot of work around mindset and breathing and fear release meditation. So after my first, I felt bulletproof. I was like, if I can do that, I can do anything. And I carried that mentality through to my training. And I don't think I've actually been mentally stronger than I was in those 12 months, 2 years after my first child. Falling pregnant and navigating a second pregnancy, so with my first child, I developed some pelvic floor dysfunction through him. So I had a really positive birth experience, but I sustained physical birth trauma. So I don't associate it as a traumatic event, but I experienced some physical trauma. So I have an internal tear of my elevator muscle. So the left side of my pelvic floor is actually weaker than the right side. So it's something that I had to be mindful with through my second and third subsequent pregnancies, is that, okay, I do need to, I got back to running and lifting and high impact after Byron, my first son. I want to get back to that point confidently after my second child. So let's just take a bit more of a conservative and smart approach. I think every pregnancy I matured, all right? As you get older, you mature generally. But yeah, I really sort of matured in my approach to things. And for that longevity of movement, I've moved since I was 3 years old. I want to keep moving until I'm 73, 83. So just that longevity piece really came into it for me.
Love it. Brooke, why is this so important? Like, why is it important that we talk about the application of training, recovery, etc., to mums to be, mums who are, and mums who have been, or been through that process? Why is this important?
Yeah. I think pelvic health only becomes a thought once we've had kids. So a lot of women might not be pregnant or experience pregnancy or go through that, and they think none of this applies to me. It's not important. I don't need to worry about that because incontinence, prolapse, any of that, that's only relevant to like women who have been pregnant or who are mums. But it's also not an old lady problem. Once we hit menopause, we're at risk of these things again. But I think the really important thing is we don't want women to get to a point because they feel good, they keep training, they're working with coaches who aren't educated in this space. And the fitness industry, where there's lots of cowboys and cowgirls out there, but it's not highly regulated. We might have a really amazing coach who's done a CrossFit level 1 course, but that's all they've ever done in their life, sort of theoretically speaking, and not grown in other areas. So women aren't supported well enough. We're not doing enough to talk about, hey, understand. your pelvic health, understand changes that need to be made so that you don't get to a point where you're symptomatic and think, gosh, why did nobody tell me? Like if you've had a musculoskeletal injury before, if you've torn a hamstring or a calf, chances are you felt pain, you felt discomfort, you've you've probably known pretty quickly that you've done something to that part of your body. The thing with the pelvic floor and the abdominals is that you don't, by the time if you're waiting for pain or pressure or discomfort, by the time you experience that, it's probably a little bit too late. There's probably some laxity or dysfunction or something happening there. So just because you feel fine or you think it's not relevant to you, I think the more we can talk about it and the more interested we can be, the more informed and empowered we can feel throughout that journey.
Okay, I'm just going to use that example. So I'm sure, obviously, the things that can happen to pelvic floor obviously sit on a massive spectrum. But like, what are the short, medium, long term repercussions of us actually not doing something about it and understanding what's happening? Like, can this stuff have like a knock on effect for the rest of life?
Absolutely. And I think like every woman's journey is unique. And I don't want to put the fear in women as to if you have babies, you will have issues with your pelvic floor. But 1 in 3 women will have urinary incontinence. And about 50% of women at some stage in their life will develop some degree of pelvic organ prolapse. And I always tell women and coaches that working your lifelong journey as a woman through exercise is so non-linear. You might not navigate pregnancy and motherhood, but every woman will navigate menopause. And when we see those hormonal shifts, we sort of like progressive overload, right? It's a really important training variable. We want to get fitter, stronger, faster, whatever it is. Sometimes that principle of progressive overload, when we apply that through a woman's seasons and through her lifelong journey, gets to a point where we need to actually regress and scale back because there might be hormonal shifts and all of a sudden they do leak when they do double unders or go for a run, or they have some vaginal heaviness, which they've never had before and their kids are 30. So why are they experiencing that now? And there can be some confusion and angst around that because they're not being told that just because you get to a point where things are balanced, like it can tip at some stage. It might not, but it can. So you want to make sure that you know as much as possible and work with appropriate allied health professionals to to feel as educated throughout that.
Okay, Brooke, I'm a coach.
Yes.
Actually, my very first ever client when I was 20 years old and set up my business was someone who had just had a child, I think 3 months before contacting me. So that was my, no, zero experience. That was my first ever client. Anyway, I did some stupid things there for sure.
Mhm.
But she ended up, I ended up coaching her for 16 years. So thankfully she forgave me. And, we actually navigated two more pregnancies after that successfully. So I think my question is, because you did say, the coaching world, there's a lot of cowboys and cowgirls. There isn't much that we need to do to become a coach, to be honest. And I think that's kind of universal, 100% here in Asia. What what are the things that we need to know? I think actually, you know what? I know that's a loaded question. My first question is like, as a male, am I in a position to be coaching women through pregnancy? Is that okay? Team, I want to quickly interrupt this episode to give a little shout out to our sponsors today, Well Spent. This little journal has made such a massive, profound impact on my life since I started using it. When I started using it, I actually didn't know that it was backed by neuroscience, but now it totally makes sense. This has brought a ton of gratitude to my life. It keeps me on track and focused on the things I need to do day to day and brings a lot of context as to how each day fits within the greater week and the greater month. So if you, like me, really care about trying to be a high performer and want to do everything you can to make that happen, I cannot recommend this journal enough. Use our discount code, The Process, to grab yours today.
I love that question because that is something that I get asked or questioned by males all the time. So in my course, I use an example where I have coached someone through her pregnancy, but she's got quads in her tummy, so 4 babies, and she's a CrossFit coach. And this male coach said to me, she's already a mum and she's a coach. What do I have to offer to her? And as males who work with women, you guys have so much to offer. you have like a non-biased approach that you can give your clients because, like you said, you've never going to go through that experience, right? Like I think that you gave me that perspective in terms of that non-biased opinion of um, I don't if I coach women through pregnancies, I've had 3 of them myself. So I could be like, oh, well, when I was pregnant, this is what worked or this is what didn't work. So you can be really good at sticking to what you know and what you don't know, and then applying that. So I think if you're, thinking, oh gosh, I'm never going to be a mum or I'm never going to experience pregnancy, you can still add value. And in that sense, even if you're working with a fitness professional through their journeys, having an experience in something doesn't make us an expert in that either. So if you've navigated pregnancy, that's great. You learn from that. You can share your experience with others and they can learn from that as well, but it doesn't make you an expert in that area. So um, I think, we go to a doctor and we assume that they can help us with our problems, that they have a base level understanding of what we're there to talk about. People who come to the gyms, they assume that you know about working with people who have a disability or who have back pain or who are pregnant. But unless you've sort of done some formal, informal upskilling in that area, we actually don't have a great base level of knowledge in that area. So there's so much to offer in that space, if you're male or female. But yeah, have it like the first time, it can also be really scary. Like you never forget your first PT session or the first time that you run a group fitness class. And I think back to some of the things that I did early on in my career. I've been in the fitness industry for 17 years now, working as a personal trainer, fitness instructor, and coach. And yeah, there's some things that I would would have changed along. Like, didn't mean I was a bad coach, but I was inexperienced, and there's some things that I would do better now.
Yeah, can 100% resonate with that.
Yeah,
Okay, so what we're saying is men, we can do this as well. So my next question is,
absolutely.
where do we start? If I go back to like 20-year-old Ed, who has, this client who reaches out to me and says, I've just had a baby 3 months ago. What are, in your opinion, like where should I start in terms of educating myself? What are the key things and most important things that I need to know that's going to probably have the biggest return on investment as a coach?
Yeah. We need to understand the physiological changes that are happening in the body in order to understand why there needs to be adjustment to programming. Because so often we think, oh, pregnant, someone's pregnant. We can't do skipping because they might wet their pants. And that's the as much as we sort of understand about it. Um,
So
so
can I tell
understanding,
you, sorry to cut
yeah,
the things that I went into that first client thinking this is all I needed to know.
yeah,
So minimize jumping because they
yeah,
might bleed themselves. Don't ever allow their head to go below their hips because blood is going to rush their head and that's going to make them really faint and dizzy. And don't do rowing because rowing is going to cause too much displacement of the blood up and down the body that's going to cause those issues. And that was literally, oh, and the only other thing I learned was their joints are going to get a little bit more lax, mobile as they get closer to pregnancy. So just be careful. I didn't actually know
yeah.
what to do with that information, but that's really all that I had. Um, so like, can we dive into it? Like, tell us, like you said, you've got to understand the physiological stuff. Like, what are the most important things that we need to know about,
Mhm.
someone who is, on the start of their pregnancy journey all the way through?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'd bring that back to the physiological things. And so like, you had some pretty good like checkbox of things. Like some of them are a bit random, but you had the right idea, but that's the reality of what most coaches go into the session with. So you go, oh yeah, let's limit jumping, and that's all we think about. You mentioned about uh, something about ligament laxity, so relaxin, that hormone's really important. So um, that helps our abdominals separate as the uterus grows. That helps the pelvic, as a baby passes through the birth canal, through childbirth. So it's a really important hormone. But if we're thinking about as we progress through pregnancy, our center of mass changes, we have lots of load through the anterior part of the body as we get bigger boobs and a bigger belly. Um, so we can become, our balance can become off. And if we're doing dynamic or short, sharp lateral changes of movement or sort of sport style training, then that can have implications because of the hormone relaxin. So as our body shape changes and that hormone is in the body, we want to think about moving away from less dynamic, more stable type maybe dual-legged exercises instead of unilateral work.
Okay, pause
So
there because this is
yeah,
all good shit. I'm just going to bring this back into simple terms. Okay, so we're saying we might. Okay, so we're saying bilateral, unilateral. We may move away from things like split squats and lunges because the pelvis is really loose here, and things can slip out of alignment. And we want to potentially move to like double leg movements. So we're talking about what, like squats, hinges, leg presses,
yes,
that kind of stuff. And then, am I on the right lines there? Please add.
yes, absolutely. The thing that I always say is if we like to operate in black and white and yes and no, pregnancy is such a grey area. So that's cool because I'm very much like, oh, what if? Oh, it depends. But some people like right and wrong.
Yeah.
What can we do? What can't we do? So I like to focus instead not on the can'ts or the don'ts, but what we can do. So yes, absolutely. If women, so instead of maybe like a dynamic you know, sidestepping type pattern, we bring that to more stable, maybe forward and backwards. Um, we would switch from single-legged movements if they have pelvic girdle pain or symphysis pubis dysfunction, but otherwise we want to keep like lunges and things in because they mimic functional movements for life in the hood. So we want to keep that in if we can, but if they have pelvic pain or it's more the dynamicness of the exercises that we want to look to reduce. So box jumps as well, that's quite dynamic, but it's also high impact. So let's bring that to a weighted step up. Something like a snatch, that's like a long lever, right? So if we're doing a barbell snatch, the longer the lever, the more load there's going to be through our lower back, through our core, through our pelvic floor. And as we get more pregnant, we can't maintain that pressure enough. So I always like to have what's called my lift principles, which is L is load and levers, I is intensity and impact, F is their function, their pelvic floor, their abdominals, and T is their tolerance, their energy. So for every movement, L, I think load and lever. If it's a long lever, can we reduce that lever? Can we front squat it? Can we back squat it? Is the load appropriate? Impact. Do we need to remove the impact? What's the intensity of the exercise like? In that first trimester, we feel really good and you can move very similar to your non-pregnant state. But you also, first trimester has the highest risk of miscarriage. So we need to give consideration to our training environment because if you're training in a non-air conditioned or not well ventilated area and it's humid, your core body temperature is actually really important in making sure that that pregnancy is viable throughout that first term. So where I train, I was running fitness classes for women in a non-air conditioned industrial shed in the middle of summer, which the climate up here is between 37 and 43 degrees Celsius during summer. And the humidity isn't as intense as, say, Hong Kong and Singapore, but it's between 60 and 70%. So it's not a really conducive environment if I'm working with someone who's pregnant. But we could use things like turning the fans on, getting little ice packs, looking at their work-rest ratio. You could get them to self-pace the workout, but even being a bit more prescriptive around, hey, I only want you working for 30 seconds and have 60 off, or being prescriptive with their load and the volume and the reps that they're doing.
Okay, so you got L, levers, I,
Yes, and
intensity,
load.
and
Yep.
lever and load, I, intensity,
Impact
impact,
and
F,
intensity. Yep.
impact and intensity, F,
Function.
function. So can we just quickly break that down? What are we talking about with function?
What's her pelvic floor like? How's the abdominal wall, whether it's pregnancy, whether it's motherhood. So for me, first pregnancy, sustained some mild pelvic floor dysfunction through that delivery journey. So then my function throughout pregnancy 2 and 3 was different to, say, my function in pregnancy 1. And women's their function can change based on the time of the month. If they're ovulating, if they're menstruating, the time of the day, if later on in the afternoon they may be more symptomatic, stress, that sort of thing. So what's their function essentially through that area?
And like, okay, so I'm just trying to put myself in a woman's shoes here. And obviously, because my wife, she's going through all this right now. We're about a month away from delivery. So I know from her that assessing the function of your body is a
Mm.
combination of, just what you said. It's kind of like listening to your body, testing it, trying it, what feels better, what doesn't feel as good. But then like going a step further, if someone wanted to really like, look beneath the hood and see what was happening to get a better understanding and snapshot of how they're functioning, what could they do?
Yes. So the gold standard would be to see a women's health physiotherapist who has done their physiotherapist undergrad, but then done postgraduate and masters in women's health and continence. And so the gold standard is an internal examination. So two fingers pushing against the front wall, back wall, side walls of the pelvic floor, getting you do a contraction, looking at strength, activation, endurance. Can you fully switch off and let go of your pelvic floor? Um, that would be, they can also do external real-time ultrasound through the lower abdomen, which is also great. And that can really help with people getting that mind-muscle connection of actually how to do a pelvic floor contraction, because they can see that real-time feedback. So booking in with someone like that is looking with that is gold standard, and it can be, you can do that when you're pregnant, you can do that when you're a mum or at any time of your journey, but they can also do measurements to understand like your risk factor for things like prolapse, and that's where they look at the genital hiatus, so the opening of the vagina, and your perineal body length as well. um, and Asian populations typically have a shorter perineal body length. And if it falls within a certain range, then you may be predisposed to a greater severity of tearing during childbirth, which can then have implications to your recovery and how you can confidently return to types of exercise as well. So, making really informed, having that information to make an informed birth choice is really important also, because often this stuff only gets talked about once we enter motherhood, because you might be experiencing some sort of symptoms here. Um, but if we can get a real time picture, even before we have kids, for the non pregnant people listening, it's really good just to get an understanding. If you're listening and you go, oh my gosh, I'd leak every time I do a heavy deadlift, or back squat, or when I get to 50 reps of double unders, but I've never had kids before, that's still something worth following up and seeing somebody. And maybe when your beautiful wife is able to take clients on after she's had babies, linking in there.
Bro, okay, so assuming people don't listen to this podcast until they are pregnant, and then you're saying
Yeah.
all this stuff and they're like, oh shit, I'm actually experiencing a lot of this stuff right now. Like,
Mm.
is it too late to start whilst, when you're pregnant? Like, is this something we have to be doing before? Like, yeah, when is it like the too late, if that even exists?
Yeah, it's never too late to start. Like working with women who are in their grandparenthood, um, you can still get really positive results. And I think that's the key for anyone who's embarking on any sort of exercise journey, whether it's for pelvic health or performance. It's never too late to start. Um, but it's making sure that you're getting the right information so that it's suitable to where you're at, so that you're not getting information from influencers on social media or personal trainers who keep themselves relatively fit and they've had a few kids. It's, are you getting your information from something that's credible and that can help you meet your goals as well? Because what are your goals going to be post pregnancy? And some women just want to be lifelong athletes. They're happy to go to the gym a few times a week for their mental and physical health. But other women are going to want to return to high level or high impact sports or performance sooner. So it's working with the right professionals who can help you get to your goals in a way that's timely and suitable for you.
Love it. So it's never too late to start.
Never too late.
Okay, what's the T?
Tolerance.
I was gonna say,
So
I know what's the T is like
yeah, I was like, what's the tea on what? What are we dishing the
against the
dirt on?
expression I literally only learned recently. Okay, so the T stands for what?
Tolerance. And so that is thinking about um, what is her tolerance like to the day? Energy. If you have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old at home, and if signed up for the 6 a.m. class and you've been up 3 times to each of those children respectively, what's your tolerance going to be like to that session based on your sleep or your nutrition or the stress that's impacting your life that then impacts your mindset and your mental health? So yeah, what's your energy and your tolerance level to what is programmed?
Okay, I'm going to bring this full circle now. So my question to you was, as a coach, like what do I need to know before
Mm,
I start taking on my first, pre-postpartum pregnancy client? So we've got the lift principles, got to educate
mhm.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Now what? Let's say I've got all this information, I've got all this knowledge. Reached out to professionals like yourself. What's like the real life application to this as my training process goes on with my client? Like how am I checking in? What language am I using? How am I building a safe environment for them to like openly share? And let's use me as an example. I'm not a female, so I'm not going to go through this myself. So like, any tips?
Yes, we need to, like I said, any screening or questions that you need to ask. We don't screen women who are pregnant and mums well enough. There might be 1 or 2 questions on your pre-exercise screen. That might be, are you currently pregnant or have you been pregnant in the last 12 months? And that's not enough information to feel confident in what you're programming for this woman. So pre-screening is really important. We want to know, what was her conception journey like? What are her contraindications? Does she have a low-lying placenta? Does she have cervical insufficiency? So we want to screen them effectively. And then as we move through pregnancy, we have those verbal ongoing check-ins, like when are you seeing your obstetrician next? Has anything changed? And then obviously things like impact, we would start to take that out between 12 to 16 weeks, depending on that woman and her pre-pregnancy and her pregnancy journey. We'd start to scale the load. As her pregnancy progresses, we should see this natural regression in load, volume, intensity. Sometimes we don't actually see that until that 3rd trimester when women actually start to feel like a baby elephant and everything. Especially if it's a first pregnancy, 2nd, 3rd, subsequent pregnancies, things change a lot quicker because muscle memory is a really cool thing.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, thinking more about those physiological changes, checking in with her rate of perceived effort, because that will be higher for any given work rate as pregnancy progresses, also because of her cardiac and respiratory changes, um, mental health. I think if you work in a group, if women are going to group fitness classes or if you do group coaching, you have a really powerful role in helping her feel supported and mentally sound through that journey, because when you're backing off intensity, it can be hard to find enjoyment in training. But going to a group fitness class, you still get that social interaction and emotional support. So even if you're scaling it and they're hopping on a erg or an assault bike and doing intervals for the duration of the session and they're doing something completely different to the rest of the group, if you can make your sessions accommodating for women, then you can, yeah, keep them moving throughout that time.
So I think like a very common question that a lot of women who come to our gym who are going through the journey ask is like, what are my do's and don'ts? And I think what
Mm.
you've already kind of said is like, we didn't really, you try not to look at it as a do's and don'ts, and it's more of the spectrum of just applying the lift principles, apply it to the person, and that let's focus on what we can do. But like, as a group fitness coach, you've got all these people coming into your room, and you see that one woman just walks into your class and she's in a 2nd trimester. Like, is there actually any like don'ts? Are there any like anything that is like, okay, just don't do this?
There is, but we
What?
also have to honour, yeah, it's so hard. And because you said spectrum, exactly that. And so often people think silos. First trimester, we follow these rules, and then bang, we follow these rules for the 2nd, and then these for the 3rd. But pregnancy is a spectrum. We need to consider what she was doing before she was pregnant. We need to consider her pelvic floor risk factors. Is it her 1st or 2nd pregnancy? And so there are things that women shouldn't be doing, but we also want to honour body autonomy as well. So we want to help women make better choices for their exercise programming. But And so that's we can do that through educating them. Hey, Claire, you're 25 weeks pregnant now. We've got double unders programmed. You know, this is your second baby. I want you to take out the impact. You can either do single skips or go and jump on the rower or the erg and give me, you know, do 200 meters or how many cows it is for the duration of that. So you've been quite prescriptive in that as opposed to saying take out the impact if you need it, because ego comes back in. Like if I need it, I don't feel like I need to take it. But hey, if Ed's told me I have to go and hop on the erg, I'll do that. Or hey, Brooke, we've got box jumps today, but I want you doing some weighted step ups. Go and grab some dumbbells. Okay, cool. No worries, coach. Um, so there are do's and don'ts, but we want to empower them to move, make sure that they're educated so they can then kind of go, well, you know what? I'm going to do double unders anyway because I can and I like them. And go, okay, well, I've told you why you should modify. And if you want to be able to do double unders symptom free post baby, just because you can do it now.
Yeah.
So for me, like I don't like the word safe and unsafe exercise either, but I could walk into a gym full of pregnant women and if they were doing various movements, there are definitely things that I would go, "Mm-mm, let's find a more appropriate way to do that. So if you want to do kipping pull-ups when you're pregnant at, you know, to the end of your second trimester, I would say you could do that, but instead let's not do that and get that same physiological response in a better way.
Yes. Yeah, I think what I've loved during this conversation is I'm thinking about, I don't mean to keep on bringing this back to my wife, but obviously I can just think about this, because I've coached so many pregnant women through, the journey of pregnancy and delivery. I've got lots of colleagues who've now gone through it as well. So I've seen just how different each of their approaches. I've had, coaches box jumping and double undering and running, deep into their second trimester. And I've had others, well, like, my wife, who basically the first trimester couldn't do anything, like,
Yeah.
really just waking up, eating and sleeping, because a 5-minute walk would just wipe her out. And this is, she's someone who's been active, her whole life, and she's trained her whole life as well. But then she's been super consistent throughout second and third trimester. But yeah, certain things like split squats and lunges just got to a point where she tried, she did a session, said, that just didn't feel quite right. Next day, she
Mhm.
had, some SI joint pain. She was like, okay, something doesn't feel quite right. Okay, I'm going to try it one more time next week. And if I'm still feeling not good, can you help me find an alternative? And it was
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. And then, she'd been back squatting all this time. She felt recently like her back squats in her last session. I think just because of all the load on the front, just kind of moving her into a bit more extension, it was harder for her to brace now, that she started to
Yes.
feel it a little bit in her back. And so she's like, okay, well, now my back's a little bit achy. Okay, maybe we move to like a 45-degree leg press, and that becomes, your pressing movement, your squatting movement for the time being. And so for her, it's always been try it, assess immediately after and the next day and the 2 days after that. Did it feel good? And then she didn't even just remove it straight away. Try it again, maybe in a few days' time or the next week. And if it's like, okay, really your body's telling you this is probably not right, then okay, we'll find a solution and a substitution. And that's kind of been
Yeah.
what this whole journey has been like. Um, yeah, have you got any thoughts on that?
No, that's perfect. You don't just wanna pull something out because a textbook says that you can't do this at 13 weeks pregnant, or like I said, she's experienced some symptoms. How did it feel at the time, the next day? And then adjusting the load or the tempo or the volume or even the stance or the range of that particular movement to then make the call of, okay, you know what, let's instead do something different that will still target that same muscle group or I always say to coaches, what's the goal or the motivation of that prescribed exercise? And then how can we get it? What do we need to consider about that for someone who's pregnant? It could even be push-ups, like whether it's the pressure through the abdominals or the flexion through the wrist.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if they might not all have that, but what could we do to still generate that same response in a better way?
Yeah. And I think what's been really cool for her, we have a program called Build, which is all about, just getting strong. And she's actually been able to follow that program the whole way through and just, make small modifications to the movements as she's needed to. Another one was, this jumped to mind, was that lying on a flat bench, in this at the start of the second trimester was really uncomfortable for her, like getting
Mhm.
down and then like feeling like she was an extension, and then she couldn't get up off the bench, and so immediately we just went everything to a slight incline. It started on a 10-degree incline, that was all pressing, then it kind of moved up to a 20-degree incline, and that has kind of been her pressing work throughout the whole of pregnancy, which has worked quite well for her.
Yeah,
So
and that's perfect.
I want to just bring something up because I have seen, the internet trolls like really jump on this one. And
Mhm.
I'm thinking, I know you know who she is because you were in the CrossFit space, but Tia Toomey, right? So
Yeah.
she was, I think she kind of like turned a lot of heads because she competed in the open. I think she was like in her second trimester, massive bump. And she was also just crushing everyone, including myself, which was slightly emasculating. But so she was, basically doing all this crazy stuff. There's also been other athletes like Stacey Tovar competing at the Rogue Invitational, like with a pretty decent bump on her and like going full tilt. Didn't look like she was holding back. And then
Mhm.
I think there were some people like I was certainly watching, being like, wow, that is amazing that she can do that. And obviously there's a question mark that kind of floats in your head, as to, I hope this doesn't have an impact on the future of her health and maybe her baby's health. But I think, I don't really know too much, but it looks like she had a really successful birth and all's okay there. But I was certainly looking at it thinking, wow, that's pretty damn amazing. The human body is capable of doing some crazy things. But then there was another side to the spectrum of people who were saying this is really irresponsible. This is a really bad example for other pregnant women. This should not be done. What are your thoughts, Brooke?
Yes, and a great question and great example, and something that I bring up in my course, and we have great discussions on as well. And Tia Claire Toomey, she's an amazing athlete. Annie Thor's daughter is one as well, who sort of maybe has shared a little bit more about, been a bit more open about the journey. But watching her do the open at that time, I mean, everyone's a keyboard warrior, and I don't like to be quick to judge. Coaches always send me, "Brooke, what do you think of this?" and videos of influencers or coaches or whoever doing things. I don't know the intricate details of their pregnancy journey. I do know that in Tia's case, she is an elite athlete, completely different to general population. So what she can be doing is different to us, but she's still experiencing pregnancy and those changes that all pregnant women do. So if I was her coach, there are things that I would have potentially further modified for her. Um, you have to assume that she's working with the best team, so that she's fully aware of, to ensure she can get back to being elite at what she does. So you have to assume that. Um, One thing I always like, I think back to some of the videos, her rowing was really good. She was, limiting extension of her trunk.
Yeah.
She was doing some kipping pull-ups, I think, or toes to bar, but she was breaking up the reps. Normally she'd do them unbroken, but there's still a lot of pressure through the core. But also it's that cumulative response. Like, is she training like that every single day through her pregnancy? And if so, maybe that would impact her postpartum recovery. But if it was, purely for the open or sporadically each week doing those things, I always like to think, where are they now and how much have they shared? Like, do they experience incontinence and they're just happy to deal with that because that lots of women are happy with where their bodies are at and they're just going to do things anyway. Um, I think my biggest fear when women, when coaches and women see that on the internet, that there's that comparison, oh, if she's doing that, then I can do that. But even more scary for coaches, for the cowboys and cowgirls,
Yes.
if she's doing that, what's your excuse? You can do that too. And it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I think as well, scaling our fitness during pregnancy, like, we're not going to go to the open. We're not going to, you shouldn't be trying for personal bests when you're pregnant. If you hit one, okay, but that's not the aim. If you're trying to hit PBs during pregnancy. Um, so I think just adapting the mindset as early as you can of, this isn't forever, it's just for now. And your pregnancy season, the 40 weeks, 9 months, whatever it is a relatively short season in your lifelong athletic journey. So yeah,
Is
that's
Brooke,
that's
is there a message that like a wish that you could like share with like the influencers of the world who have these big followings that have this ability to do all the things you just said, you know, when they're sharing their journey, is there this little thing that you see these things and you just wish they would add this little caveat or this, is that something you think about? I think it's something.
Yeah, yes. When I work with the coaches as well through my course, I always having a little disclaimer. I mean, social media accounts, they're our own, and if people like, we shouldn't have to worry about offending others or other people think. But it is, great. I would always post like this works for me in my pregnancy. Like, consult your whoever to ensure that it's okay for you. So it's always good to have a disclaimer. It's not essential. I think I just wish that yeah, everyone would upskill to some extent in this area, because it could go a long way to making sure that women, yeah, feel good throughout their journey.
Love it. Brooke, I feel like we could go on forever on this. And I
Mm,
also feel like I know actually there's a lot more that you have to share on, you know, the different seasons and stages of life for women. And so I think we're gonna 100% have to get you back on to dive into all things, you know, peri and menopause. But I think to wrap this up now, my first question to you is where can people find out more about you, Brooke, and how can they work with you in some way, shape, or form?
absolutely. So if you're on Instagram, you can jump on and we can share the handle. It's Brooke.Turner. Through my website as well, I deliver my functional fitness for pregnancy and postpartum course virtually and online. I travel to Singapore often and deliver it over there. So if you do want to upskill in this area, this course is recognised globally. It's ACE certified as well for you to get your CPD points. I also then have my web-based app, which has a Empower for Pregnancy, Rebuild from Birth, and then a few other programs in there as well to support women through their lifetime of athleticism. So if you want to connect or reach out, please do so.
Love it. Brooke, I mean, I have definitely learned a lot from you today. And for someone who's been doing this for a really long time and is actually, you know, as I said, on this pregnancy journey as we, you know, as we prepare for our first child, it's actually just really reassuring to know there's a lot of things that, you know, we're doing that, okay, we're on the right lines because I think it is really quite anxiety inducing, I'd probably say,
Mm.
you know, like this journey. And you know, I'm not even the one delivering. But you know, I think sometimes about all the information, obviously Instagram has picked up on my algorithm that I'm about to have a baby. So I'm just getting fucking nailed with all this information every day. And it becomes
Mm.
quite overwhelming, even for me. It makes me feel like I'm not prepared. I need to be, I don't know, reading more books. I need to be doing more courses. You know, am I going to mess up, you know, my child and their future and my wife? So I think just having people like you, you know, who can honestly, I think not having black and whites for a lot of people makes it more confusing. But I think for me, actually, it
Mhm.
feels a lot more reassuring to know that, you know, everyone is different. Don't just take what you see on someone else to be, you know, the way. So thank you for doing all that you do. And thank you for sharing, you know, a very small part of, you know, your knowledge and how you can help women. But we do have a closing tradition on this podcast. And that question is to ask you, well, what is a quote or a mantra that resonates with you right now?
Mhm. So as a busy mum of as a busy mum of 3 and someone who also is quite ambitious, something that has I've always reassured myself quite regularly is that I have to be content to progress with small steps. Um, whether that's in with my fitness goals or with my work goals, because being present with my kids is really important, but I'm also really passionate and lucky with what I get to call work as well. So for me, it's this constant juggle and balance of how can I be a really present, good mum because family is the priority, um, and not getting anxious or short tempered when I know that there's work building up in the background or all these things that I could be achieving. So for me, it's yeah, you need to be content to progress with small steps, and I suppose that's where that consistency and every little bit gets you closer to your goals.
I love that. I resonate. I think a quote that I always remind myself of, which is very similar, is just one day at a time.
Yeah.
I often have this idea that I can just do everything, and when I'm not doing everything, and I'm not progressing at like the speed of light, that I'm lagging behind, or I'm not good enough,
Yes,
or I need to be better. And yeah, there are only finite hours in a day that we can put our time and energy towards, and making sure that I'm just very slowly moving in the right direction is better than moving the opposite way.
100%.
Love it, Brooke. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining, and great to reconnect with you. And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to having you on to talk more about the things you're passionate about.
Thanks so much, Eden, for having this conversation. I look forward to it.
Before we say goodbye, here's one crazy statistic for you. Did you know that almost 40% of people who listen to the show don't actually subscribe to it? Now, I didn't think that was a big deal until I actually learned about the power of hitting subscribe. For you, the listener, you get to stay up to date when we drop episodes on a weekly basis. But for us as a podcast, it really helps our visibility and helps us attract great brands and great listeners to help grow this podcast. So if you enjoyed this episode or you're a big fan of the show, please do us a massive favor and hit subscribe. Thank you so much.